All right, I'm going to run through this one a little bit quicker so you can hopefully get the practice in. I'm going to pseudocode problem number 2 from our homework assignment, Programming Challenges number 2 from chapter 3. Hopefully by now you're getting comfortable with being able to open up idle. You can go from the interactive shell, choose File New, and be able to create a new file. I've called mine example2.py. I started off with some header information. So remember the 3 apostrophes. You should put in the author information, the date, the purpose of the program, maybe the assignment name or something along those lines and what your program is trying to do. We agreed in our last video that we know we're supposed to start coding in modules, but we don't quite have the tools to do that in Python yet. So we're just going to comment that a main module would go first, and this is where we would put in our main module information, and we'll learn how to do that soon enough. And then I'm just going to follow the pseudocode that we already have written out. I don't have to develop the logic. We've already done it. So now it's just a matter of translating that into Python. If I look at the main module, the first thing it does is declare an item name as string. So I'm going to put item. Remember that we're starting our variable names with lowercase and doing a camel casing. And we're going to give this an empty string to indicate that this is a variable of a data type string. It says we need to declare 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these as floats. So I'm going to do pound price equal to 0. Incidentally, I cannot put a comma here and do total price equals to 0, even though that seems easier. If I try to run this, I will get a compile error. Can't do that. It doesn't like it. So I need to make sure that you put these in separate lines. So let's see how fast I can type. Unit price equals 0. Pounds equals 0. Oh, these are all floats, aren't they? So these should be 0.0. Otherwise, we would be saying that they're ints, integers. When you're a cool programmer, you just use the word int and float. But that's what we're talking about, integers and floating points. And then ounces is equal to 0.0. Okay, good. So now we've got our main module done. We don't know how to do these calls yet, but we'll learn soon enough. Then we have our input data module. So I'm going to make a comment for the input data module. And the input data goes in this module. So remember we said that if I have a write statement where I'm doing a prompt, I can incorporate that right into my input statement and in Python, and then I'm going to put it in this variable name. So I'm just going to do that all in one line. Item name is equal to input parenthesis. You can open and close your parenthesis right away if you don't want to forget that closing parenthesis. And then I'm going to take my prompt and just copy and paste because I don't want to type all of that. Don't have to, it's already done and it's already spelled correctly. It's not the pretty green, so I need to make sure I put the quotes on it. That makes this a string literal. So literally type this out to the string, to the console or to the window, and then get an input and put that input, which is returned as a data type string. Remember, item name needs to be a string, so I don't need to do any more conversions. This looks good. So item name equals input, and here's my input prompt. Okay, and enter. So same thing here. I'm trying to get pound price, and I need to, this is my prompt, so I'll do the same thing. Pound price, pound, P-O-U-N-D, price is equal to input, get data. I'm going to close my quotes. Well, there we go, I guess. So I need to get, what am I doing? Pound per price, that's this prompt. And copy that in. Close my string with my closing quotations, close my input function with my closing parenthesis. I got that nice gray block. Okay, looks good. Let me just run that before I put more code to make sure I haven't made any errors yet, because I don't want to try and figure out where my errors were if I have too many lines of code written. Please enter the name of the item. Well, maybe it's a book. Please enter the price. I guess it's not a book, but price per pound. Well, you pay $5. Well, it kind of feels like that with textbooks, doesn't it? $5 per pound. And I didn't get any errors, so I didn't make any calculations. It's done what I've asked it to do so far, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, so next is input. We did pounds per price. Next is pounds. So get pounds, NDS, is equal to input, and then in my quotes, enter weight in pounds. I feel a conversion coming on here. Close my literal string, close my input function with the closing parenthesis. I've got the gray block, so that's good. But remember, here's my problem now. Remember, and I have to keep thinking about this, this is returning a data type string. Whatever's entered at the keyboard is being returned as a string. Pounds needs to be a floating point. It's not, this is returning a string, so I need to convert this into a float. So I put the word float in front of input, surround input with those parentheses, and now input gets, this is the order in which things get evaluated. First the string gets put to the screen. Input then sits at the screen and waits for a value to be entered. Somebody types something at the keyboard, that value is then converted into a float, and then that float value is put into pounds. So, whew, that's a lot in one sentence, isn't it? It's a very busy sentence. Okay, and so then we have to do one more. According to our pseudocode, we need to do the ounces. So we need to get ounces is equal to, well, again, floating point, so I'm just going to get started with it. Float, I gotta spell float right. Float, input, input. I'm going to copy this so I don't have to type it, because you can see that typing is not my best trait. Close my literal string with the other closing quote. Close my input function with the closing parenthesis. And then notice that it says, well, I'm good with this portion, but we haven't closed all of it yet because I haven't closed my closing parenthesis for the float function. And now I look good. Okay, phew, I look good. All right, so let me just run this to make sure that I don't get any errors. I guess I'm buying the book, and it's $5 per pound. Enter the weight in pounds. Enter my weight in pounds. It is, God, textbooks are like 15 pounds, aren't they? Enter in ounces, they're probably 9 ounces. Okay, it did things. I don't know if it, I'm looking good so far. So again, if you test, just do little snippets at a time and then test it to make sure that what you did is correct. All right, so now we're going to on to the next one, the perform calculations module. So perform calculations module. All right, so it says I need to set unit price, which should be a floating point. Yes, I've declared it, is equal to pound price divided by 16. Well, if I'm going to use something in a calculation, I better make sure I got that value, I got that variable set to something before I try and use it. In other words, I'm going to look ahead and make sure, oh yes, I did get pound per price. I got it from this input. So there is a value in this variable at this point in time. In other words, as it read each line, things happened in order. And in order, pound per price received a value. So by the time I get here to use it in a calculation, that variable does in fact have a number in it. So this calculation can be made by the computer and everything will continue to run smoothly. That calculation will be put into unit price. Super. Okay, so the next line says, and I'm here on this right here, this next line is this particular computation, which says total price is equal to pound per price times parenthesis pounds, O-U-N-D-S, plus ounces divided by 16. Spaces for readability, not necessarily, you don't have to do it. Okay. Okay, remember your order of operations, just reminding you that your order of operations, whatever's inside of this parenthesis will be calculated first. But the first thing inside of this parentheses that will be calculated is the order of precedence says division is going to be done first. So first ounces will be divided by 16, and that result will be added to pounds. Now that the parenthesis has been evaluated, that entire calculation then will be multiplied by pound per price. So remember your order of operations to get the outputs that you expect. All right, and then we're going to go to our next module, which is output results. Output results module. And we're going to write for the item, and okay, so we need to display, wrong language, print, parenthesis, for the item, parenthesis, plus, let's use those commas because we don't want to get in that trouble again. Item name, okay? Incidentally, if I want a space to show up between the colon and the variable data, I have to make sure I allocate for that space in this quotation. So that's important. Otherwise, it'll get mushed together, which is not pretty output. Print. Has to be in quotes. The unit price is $. I don't want a space between the $, and my number. Unit, comma, unit price, comma, quote, space, and the total, let's see, I'll just copy this, and the total cost of blah, 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 blah. Now, before I forget, plus total price, okay, comma, close that, comma, total price. Okay, now, before I move on, I do want to point something out. Like, well, why don't you just copy and paste all of that in? Why do you type it in? Here's a problem. If you go from Word and you copy in some of Word's characters, for example, these quotations, Word has what are called smart quotes, and smart quotes are fancy. Smart quotes, even though it's really hard to see, these quotes have little dots that point inward, and these little quotes have dots that point inward, so they're actually two different characters. Your Python code is not going to understand these fancy quotes, and so even though it looks like normal quotes to you, internally it'll cause you a problem. It won't compile, and you'll be looking at your code going, oh my gosh, it looks perfect, why isn't it running, what happened? And I'm just telling you now, don't get into the habit of copying all of this in. You've seen me copy in just plain text, that's fine. But I'm not copying in this whole line of quotes and plus and all of that. I'm typing it in, and that's the reason why. So if you do that, you'll find that you'll get some errors, and life isn't going to be as fun as you had otherwise hoped. All right, so now we purchased all that. Okay, and so now it's time to try and run it and see if it in fact works. So let's go back over here. I'm going to make this stretch. There we go. So now let's run it and see what happens. We did not get a compile error. Let's see if we get a run error. Books. Enter the price of the books per pound. $5 per pound. Enter the weight. It's $15 per pound. And enter the item's weight in ounces. Maybe they're 9. Oh, so we got an error. So what's our error? Again, here we have that string and int problem on line 22. So, oh yes, we've got a problem here, don't we? So let's look at line 22. If you don't know where line 22 again is, you can go edit and go to line 22 if you don't feel like counting it all out. And it doesn't like this line right here. So it feels that one of these is a string and one of them is a, what did it say? One is a string and one is an int. So that means that pound per price is a 0. Oh, sure enough, what happened? We said that pound per price is a floating, but we input it with the string. We didn't convert that to a float. Uh-oh. Okay. So let's float. Let's convert that string to a float. There we go. And now we'll run it. Enter the name of your item. Book. Enter the price of the item per pound. $5 per pound. It's 15 pounds and 9 ounces, and sure enough, we got our code to work. So, and again, don't worry about this output having lots of decimals. That's kind of normal right now, and we'll learn in the future how to make that work. The next thing for you to do is to test that to make sure that that is in fact the output that you expected. So if we pull out our calculator and we did the calculation, we said that a book is $5. What was our formula? We said that pounds, ounces divided by 6. So we take our price per pound. Where did my calculator go? Oops, I can't do it all on the screen at the same time. This is very confusing. Okay, so our pound price was $15, or was oh, I don't remember what we input. It's been so long ago. $15 per pound. So if we did $15 per pound divided by 16, that means that our books cost us 93 cents per ounce. So let's see, unit price is, let's see, pound price. Oh, it's $5 per book. See, my outcome wasn't working out right. So $5 divided by 16 is 3.3125. So yes, that worked out correctly. So it's always good to test your code to make sure that your output is in fact what your calculations are supposed to. Of course, if you were doing your calculation here properly, you wouldn't have to worry about that. You would just trust your formula. So again, good reason to trust your pseudocode or do your pseudocode thoroughly beforehand, so that way writing your code is pretty darn easy. So that's example number 2. So hopefully this helps get you Pythoning or comfortable with Pythoning or jumping into Pythoning and programming. Anyway, let's start programming.